All right, let me start sharing again. All right, so let's go over a little bit of news and events coming up in the near future. So I got a couple to share. So one of them is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We were talking a little bit about accessibility before folks joined, but coming up very soon, 2 days from now, is May 18th is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And the purpose of that is to get everyone talking and thinking about accessibility. We've covered that in one presentation. Peter did a great job of talking about what it means for your website. So take a look at the accessibility.day. I'll put the link into the chat later, or someone else can dump that in there as well. A lot of different events going on that day, all around the world. One I did want to call out, and I'll put a link to this as well too, is specifically to website building. So on also that same Thursday, 4 o'clock Central Time, there's going to be a panel discussion. I know some of these people you've probably seen at other WordPress panels. Amber Hines, I know, is one that is kind of very familiar in the WordPress space. So there's going to be a good panel discussion talking about building accessibility into websites with some experts around that topic. So feel free to, it's free to register. Like I said, I'll put the link into the chat afterwards, coming up in 2 days. And just the other thing, again, right around the corner, 20th anniversary, happy 20th anniversary to WordPress. There's a lot of events going on. We don't have anything specific planned, but we'll definitely make sure that we mention it on our Facebook page too. If you're interested, there is an entire website for it. This wp20.wordpress.net. Again, I'll put the link afterwards into the chat. Take a look. It's really impressive. I believe on the website itself is where they have some of the timeline that talks about what's happened to WordPress, how it's evolved over the past 20 years to where we are today. It is quite amazing. You think about technology that people have used and really has evolved over the past 20 years. There's not a lot of things that have survived as long as it has. So worth celebrating, certainly. So that's coming up at the end of the month. And tool or plugin spotlight. Peter, that's you. What do you got this month for us?
Yeah. Let me just share the screen real quick. Oh, you disabled sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can make you. Yeah, 1 second. Sorry about that. We're busy chatting. So there we go.
Very good. So the first thing I want to mention too is 621 came out just now. So just FYI, it popped up while I was pulling up our site. The tool that I'm not sure if we've talked about this before, and for anyone who doesn't know about it, but VirusTotal is a great online tool to use. Virustotal.com. You can scan a file for virus. If you have some file that you downloaded and you just want to check, you can upload it through VirusTotal. You might have your own virus scan, but there's another use for another opportunity to scan. What I use a lot of times is I'll use VirusTotal to scan a website. So say we take our Hartford site and pop that in there and hit the scan. Now this is going to go through memory. I scanned our site an hour ago. You can refresh it, but VirusScan will look and see if there are any issues with your site. A lot of times it will have to do with either finding things or finding things that other tools have found. So whether you get blacklisted and all, but VirusTotal is a great thing just to run your site through every once in a while. And then very quickly while we're here, another tool is that I use also for that same purpose is Kutera, which is a free virus scan tool you just put in your website. Interestingly, and for those who happen to know Brian, when I scanned Hartford WP there were 2 warnings on that. So malicious files. This will be something, and this is one of the things that happens. So you don't always necessarily panic, you just get alerted to. So when I went to the scan file analysis, the malicious files it found 2 here, they were files that reference frostwp.com. FrostWP is Brian Gardner's theme and is hosted on that site. And I do have the FrostWP theme loaded on the Hartford WP site as to try out every once in a while. So now it'll be very interesting.
Oh my goodness.
Figure out what popped up here.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very, again, it's not a panic thing, but it's an alert. But it'd be also interesting to find out maybe there is an issue and we want to, I'll help Brian out and say, hey, I found this. Is this anything So virus tool, Kutera for scanning. And one last thing that I use, and I'm not sure if we mentioned it, just thought, if you've not used builtwith.com, a lot of time I show folks the WP theme detector, but Built With is also another great quick tool to just go and check some things. If you're looking at a website and you're curious, what they're using on that site, if it understands, if in a WordPress site, it'll find things like widgets, but it'll also find things like, we're using Cadence on this site. It's WordPress, linking to a Facebook site. Hover is a registrar for that. And on down the line, you get into some kind of interesting things when you look at sites. But these are three kind of tools that I often call up, and I thought, if I haven't talked about them yet, and I might be repeating myself, but Built with Kutera and Virus Total are very handy web tools for checking your site.
Is that Frost thing, by the way, is that now on the repository? I think it's on the WordPress store. Yeah, because I think I've installed to play around with it. I think I saw there's a 1.0 version.
Exactly. Yep. Just this week or the end of last week, but yeah.
Everybody on this call should send an email to Brian.
Exactly.
three or four times. Just
overload.
I mean, this is his prize.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm sure. Yeah. Hopefully someone else has notified him too.
Well, here's what I'm going to do in the background just for fun. And I know that we've got, is go back here. And what happens if I do this? It'll take, when you scan Kutera, you get put in a queue for the free version. It'll take, so I'll let that chug in the background and take a peek in a little while.
All right.
All righty.
Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome.
Grab the screen back.
Yep.
There we go. All right. Yep. So as I mentioned again, just to everyone, we'll send out the link as well to this when I'll send out something probably tomorrow morning when the video is uploaded to YouTube. But this is our website that Peter put together and hosts, where we're storing all of our presentations going forward. Again, because we realize obviously people may not want to be on Facebook for various reasons, and also just from a presentation standpoint, it only took us 5 years, but swapping PowerPoints back and forth Peter found a better way. So this is something great, and this might be something in the summer session too to dive into a little bit more.
Yeah.
So let's kick it off. Let me click on this. So again, our topic tonight is exploring the power of WordPress text blocks part 2. We'll talk a little bit about, if you missed it, part 1, what that was about. Oops, sorry, my Zoom window in the way. So our agenda for tonight's presentation, we'll do some quick introductions of who I am and who Peter is. We'll talk, that's where we'll cover let's maybe cover it now. So the background behind this deep dive series, because I don't think we have a slide for it. So if you missed it, last month, we started this off. Part 1 was covering the paragraph block, the heading block, and the list block, which you would think, like, how could these guys talk about that for over an hour? And we easily took an hour to do that, because first off, those are some of the core blocks that most people will use. And there's really a lot behind them. So we really spent a lot of time going into those features you may not be aware of, how they work. And I think that sort of set the foundation for tonight's presentation, but don't worry if you missed that one. So what we're doing tonight is we're covering the remaining text blocks. We're covering the quote block, classic block, etc. And our thought behind this series is we're not going to do this every single month to the end of the year, but we're going to do these throughout the year. And the background around that is, especially we're talking about the 20th anniversary of WordPress. WordPress has changed so much in the past 2 years, I'd say, or well, maybe 3-ish years with Gutenberg and the block editor, where even people like myself and I'm sure the rest of you who use it almost day to day, sometimes we can't keep up with what's going on. So we thought this would be a good time to step back a little bit and take a look at all of the blocks that are built into WordPress. So forgetting about themes or anything, look at the core blocks and doing a deep dive to each of them. And we're kind of grouping them together just as WordPress does based on category. So this is part 2. We're wrapping up the text blocks. That's what we're going to be covering tonight. So Peter will be talking about the quote blocks first. I'll be talking about the code block and preformatted block. Then we'll finish it off with the table block and classic block, and then a little bit of wrap up where we'll talk about what we're going to be doing for the summer and what's next. Real quick, I'm Ray. I'm one of the co-organizers of the Hartford WordPress Meetup group. I've been in IT in one form or another for over 25 years. Most of my corporate career, I would say, was spent as a software developer / software architect, worked for some large corporations. Using WordPress, since then, since I kind of left the corporate rat race, probably for the past 7-ish years. So I'm self-employed, a website developer, married, no kids. I live in Newington, Connecticut, and I am a geek. Peter.
Yeah, I'm Peter Ingersoll, co-organizer with Ray. I've been working on the web since the beginning of the web. Because I worked for a newspaper that was trying to figure out how to get that information out, and I was lucky enough to be part of a small team that did that. So that was a great opportunity for me. The web work that I did has allowed me a lot of work in organizations, but also using my communication and marketing experience. I've been over 10 years using WordPress. It's allowed me to become self-employed. I'm married with 2 kids. I live in South Windsor, Connecticut, and I am a self-declared admin and DIY advocate, WordPress advocate, just from a non-developer, non-coder, but we all use it all the ways that we use it kind of perspective. So there you go.
I can keep sharing my screen if you want, Peter, because I know you just have one slide, and then you can take it over when you want to do the demo. So I'll shut up here.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So what we're talking about tonight is, as Ray said, is we're continuing our discussion about the text blocks that are out there, and kind of group these together: the quote block, the pull quote, and the verse blocks. You might not use all of them, but you also might not know that, have an idea of where they might come in handy for some of the things you do, especially if you're writing blog posts. And you want to highlight certain content. These are the tools that you do, especially the first 2, the quote block and the pull quote. The quote block, one of the things that changed, I can't remember exactly when, year or so ago, that separated it from the pull quote, is that the quote block is actually, in effect, a container for other blocks. So you can put paragraph and image and other things within a quote block, and it has its own specific formatting for calling out the content that you have inside a quote block. At its very basic level, it is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to quote somebody and you're going to have a citation there. Pull quotes are formatted often a different way, and is basically one block of text. And you can format it closer to images. And what I mean by that is like things like, the borders, and setting it up to be left aligned or right aligned, and have certain content wrap around them. And you'll see, and we'll talk about this kind of on and off throughout the whole thing, and as we have in a lot of our previous meetups, how theme dependent a lot of this is. I'll show you one thing and then show it in a different theme. And so always keep in mind that what we show here may not work exactly the same way depending on what theme that you're looking at. But we're going to start with, I'm going to be using primarily the 2023 theme, but I'll also show it in other themes too, as time allows, just so you can see the difference. The verse block, verses, poetry and lyrics. It's a single text block. It allows you to enter a whole lot. You hit an enter key, you're still in that block. It kind of locks everything in. It has a certain level of formatting allowed to it, but it's like if you're going to put song lyrics or something like that, you want to treat that differently. That's how you would use a verse block. And again, as I said, the default design is defined by the theme, but there is a level of customization that can be done. So why don't I jump right in, and we'll just go through some of these things. All righty, so where's my Zoom window? Share. I'm curious, while I'm pulling this up, do people use any of these at this point?
I use the quote block a lot.
Yeah.
We use them all the time.
Okay.
At the top of every blog post, we put a TLDR and a little summary of the blog post, and it's just a block quote that we CSS'd.
There you go. Okay. I'm gonna try something here too that I haven't tried before. Maybe curious if this is gonna help or hurt. On the full screen. Okay, so we talked about. I'm going to go into my demo here, and I basically have this simple post that will walk through some of the techniques about how you can use these different tools. One thing I did want to show, especially the folks that we have on this call that you might find interesting, I do have a short code here. I'm going to get out. I'm not used to. I thought I would be clever and use full screen, but I'm just not used to it because I want to keep going up to my tabs here. Anyway, so see at the top, I have what version and the active theme 2023. The reason I put that at the top is if we start jumping around and showing different themes to remind myself what theme that we're actually looking at. And you know what? This was a Chat GPT bit of code snippet to create this little piece of code that also, then I said, now make that a short code, which is exactly what I've put into the short code block up here. So just FYI for anybody who's interested as to what that is and where it came from. All right. So I did myself a favor and wrote down some steps that I want to go through. As Ray said, learning things after a couple of years, this might be one of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a quote block. So I'm on a new line and hit the slash and the Q for quote. Again, for anybody who's not sure, you can do it that way. You can also go to insert and then go to quote and insert it that way. So there's a lot of ways to insert, but I'm kind of used to the keyboard way, the slash, and then the first, start typing in which block I want to pull up. So right now, if I go back to my list view, you'll see that I've got, here's my quote block, and it starts with a blank paragraph. And that's what your quote block looks like when you first start it. So we're going to put some content in it. I'm going to come down here. I was just got some copy down here, but if you're in your quote block and you just, now you paste your paragraph content in there, that is now boxed in. Depending on the theme, you are either going to see something that looks different here or not. And the 2023 theme, very simple approach to how it shows quote blocks. The one thing that you will see at the bottom is the citation. I'm just going to remember that was Robert Greene Ingersoll, a favorite person of mine from the Great Order from the 1890s. And that's at its basic, that's what a quote block is. And you do not have to use the citation is a optional block. But again, if you're using it as a quote, you would typically want to have a citation. If we preview that and go to the front, I now have this incredibly simple quote block, right? So now, so I've added the paragraph, the citation. One of the things now to look for is, and this is in the 2023 theme, the options that you have for the quote block. And remember, you can highlight your paragraph or go one up to the quote block. You could do that by going through your selector and saying, okay, I'm on paragraph, and now I want to select the quote block. Or in your list view, you can say, okay, I am on the paragraph. I want to choose the quote block itself, the container for that quote. And you can say, maybe I want to give it a slight background color. You can change the typography and make this, large like that. There's a number of things that you can do with the formatting, just kind of in this common. It's not dissimilar from any other text blocks that we showed from last time. Where it gets, one of the things that's kind of interesting is you see that the styles are default and plain. They're the same on this particular theme. In different themes where you have different theme variations and what's been written, or if you've written your own variations, you might have different styles for your block quotes. We're not getting into that level of detail, you know, and that's especially when you start talking CSS and having deep control over things. That's sort of more Ray's territory than mine. I'm much more on the interface here. But another thing then I want to show you is that if you hit now, you know, this is a new paragraph, right? So this is what I mean by the block quote is highlighting, is adding blocks within that container. And in fact, if you wanted to, you could put an image, for example, in a block quote. I don't know what I have here. If I want to put this little guy here and I want to, you know, make it small and move it to the right. The format, it gets a little wonky. This is right from that line, so I might want to move this guy further up to have him appear differently. But you can put in a quote box, you can put other types of blocks. So that's kind of that's it for the quote block. Again, it's very basic, but it has its purpose. A pull quote.
Hey, Peter, I'm sorry. So can you show that just on the, so what you just saved there, can you show that on the page itself? Yeah, do a preview, because sometimes you're right, these things look, okay, good.
And you can see, this is one of the things that I find there's a certain level of inconsistency, and depending on themes and all, my right align didn't stick. And I don't know why. I've come across that. And this is 2023. And it could be that once you're, you know, that CSS, so you'll have to experiment a little bit. I don't know if anyone else has come across certain things like that, or have even tried to put in, but you know, if I'm expecting that this right alignment is going to do that, you know, choosing to align that and then have the text wrap around like it shows in the editor, for some reason, I'm not seeing it on the front end.
Peter, what would happen if you aligned the block quote left?
The entire block quote?
Oh, just the paragraph that's misbehaving with the picture.
So if I line, oh, so
it is left.
Yeah.
Do they have a none choice? That's odd,
isn't it? And this is as basic a setup as you can get. So
yeah,
maybe we found something.
Peter, there's a question also from Elisa around. So this one, again, I think I know the answer, but where there's no quotes showing on the front end, right? So when you actually look at it, there's no the traditional quote marks around it.
Right.
Why is that?
So why is there no like big quote in the corner and all? Because that is a layout, a CSS defined by the theme generally.
In standard default, slightly older WordPress, you got a colorful border.
Yep.
On one, either I think on the left side of a block quote.
Right.
And I mean, we CSS them to put in big quotes.
Yeah. I would assume if later, if you get a chance to change the theme quickly on this site.
Yeah, and we could do it now, or let's get, you know, these three together and let's play with the themes real quick. And this is why sometimes we find that once you start getting in there and you're experimenting, you discover a lot of things that are like, oh, let's try this. Dimensions is one thing I want to make sure that we're also showing. So padding, and then being able to give it more padding. So that gray box, for example, now I set that padding for the paragraph. What I wanted to do is set it for the quote block, and I can't. It's not an option for the quote block. It is at a paragraph level. So if you want to set the padding around something consistently, whatever size I picked, you do it on the per paragraph level. So that's kind of an interesting, I would like to see that for that whole quote block. And again, theme specific. If we go to this, to the quote block in even a different theme, we might see that there is padding available to us. So let's keep going. Let's do the pull quote. The pull quote is kind of interesting because of where we have just, say I took that, let's grab the same text. Maybe I want to use, and why would you use a pull quote? I like pull quotes when you're calling out a specific piece of text that you've written in. It's like you're putting the big highlighter on something. That's one way to use a pull quote. So in this pull quote, you're seeing the default is giving you a line at the top, a line at the bottom, centering the text. That's the default. The pull quote does not have paragraphs inside it. It is just that text that is, instead of a paragraph, it is a pull quote. And the only addition is if you wanted to add citation there, but say you're pulling it out of your own, you might not want to do that. You might want to say something that you've literally pulled from the copy on your post or your page that you are showing. So adjusting the color, the background typography, again, is very similar. That the same choices you get, say you wanted your text to be bold, this is under the typography setting, similar to what we're showing in some of the other tools. Where it gets a little interesting is now in the pull quote, you have the border that you can add. And say you wanted to put a blue border and you wanted to give it, you're selecting the border choices, and maybe you want to give it some rounding around it. And now you could put that as an option that you have specifically in the pull quote. This is again similar to being able to set up some of the formatting on certain images and certain other like the group block. Specific to images is the fact that on the pull quote you can align it left or right, which to me are more how I would use a pull quote. You could put a pull quote right in the center of your copy. You could use it as a way of highlighting a block of text right in the middle of your copy. If you decide that you wanted to align it differently, you could choose, similar to images, choose your alignment here. So a lot of, so you're aligning right. Now, what's interesting about this, again, depending on the theme, is it'll do this outside of the content box, which gets kind of interesting depending on how your formatting is. This is again, we're using 2023. So 2023 out of the box, if you're aligning your pull quote and you're not adjusting anything else, and you want to align it to the right, you can see now that this is showing that quote, and you'll see that I inserted it just above verse, so it is now aligning it to the right and then wrapping everything to the left of it. So now that verse block, if I were to want to do this differently, I might then take this pull quote and move it above my list. And now if I preview that, see, I've now moved that pull quote to be both right aligned, but now it's positioned here. You could even move it above the pull quote heading if you wanted to, but that sizing is a bit much. We've got back on the editing. If we look at
Peter, before I forget, when you get a chance, can you show that in mobile view? I'm curious what that looks like, and where does that going to fit in your responsive view?
If we look at this, yeah. So it just
okay.
Yeah, it pops it above. This is where many of us are going to want to go to our themes that have very specific settings for mobile, instead of having to, worry about whether it be CSS, and we would adjust this and make it a smaller font size. But yeah, it's popping that in. Although if you notice, it's still right aligned because this isn't a full size. It's not a full size image. That'd be more full size. So not fully intuitive, might need a little CSS. but in terms of how it works, this is, see, now I made that full. If I preview that, you can see that's now full width. So that's even taking up a whole different block versus if I set this to none in terms of that alignment. And if I preview that, now it's going to be within the confines of the content width. So like everything that we say, experiment. Make yourself a little sample page off to the side. Try a few things and see if you can get something you like. Now, what's nice is with all of these is if I'm going to duplicate this. So now I have these two, but say I came in here and I wanted to change the border, so I wasn't showing any border on the left or right. And you could do these types of things. So now I'm doing direct border control. Maybe I've got, oh, I like this new technique where it looks like parentheses or something like that. And I want to make this, red because I want to make it red and that type of thing. And you say, okay, I like that. Well, I have this other block quote. Now I want it. You can use the option to come up here and go copy styles. And now go to, if you have a similar block, and I can now paste the style and it'll paste that style there. So as you're using the different text blocks, these things carry over from one to another, those types of techniques that you have. One thing that gets really interesting is, and you'll see this when we start playing with showing these things in different themes, is when you start setting the details like this, now you're overriding what the theme default is. So you can go into your own, you can change the theme and go, oh, it looks the same. But if I had just put it there, did nothing, and used the default, the plain or the regular, whatever it is, in different themes, it could look completely different. Maybe you have a theme that puts a big grayed out quotation mark here and things like that. So there's a lot of things that happen. And this is where once you have a theme, you get used to, you find out what works for you in that theme. Jumping around themes is just not something that you need to do. Sometimes I hear some of the conversations about, well, if you want to change themes, and it's like, do people really need to change a theme that often? Because you do so much work to make something work in a theme. You're not often changing a theme unless you're at a point where you need to update it because you're basing for me, it's like you have a theme that has a lot of functionality built in that now you want to change that. So that's the pull quote. Any questions on that? We get into let's see, demonstrate copy and pasting, and kind of went through these steps. The verse block, it is a single block. You put in text. I will grab the copy from here. Paste it in, and you can have it left aligned. You can center it. You can set your text to be semi-bold in this case. Maybe I want the background here to be a gray, and so on. Very similar to all of these tools. But what's different about the text block is, the verse block is, this is where when you hit enter, you are just adding basically a carriage return, a break within. You're not adding a new paragraph. You are just adding a carriage return line feed for all of us old timers who used to refer to some of these things as carriage return line feeds. And you do have actually the citation. It's interesting. Did that go away from me?
Is it on the bottom? You just can't see it.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Let me add another one and see if it's a default that goes away. I'll insert after /verse. I guess it doesn't have a citation. I think
No, it's just the pull quote.
I'm misremembering that. but the copy and pasting of the style, all of those types of things. But again, pretty basic. If you have the need for a verse, that probably need that one a little bit less. Here's an example like how I had it here. Again, if I wanted to copy that style, come up here, paste the style. I think, folks seeing that being, the habit of that and the capabilities is never a bad thing to show. If I'm looking at that block, I was trying to see, always remember, especially in things like in the block themes, your dimension choices. So if you click on dimensions and you want to look at padding and margin, those 3 dots, padding is showing, you can add margin around it. It's using the small, medium, large, or now in this theme, it's using 1, 2, 3, giving you that blue highlight. So, and again, now looking at the front end, this is what what we've done in this theme. Let me know, let's go through everything maybe and come back and then play with the different themes. You think that makes sense?
Yeah, because I think that'll highlight a couple different things. Can I ask you just before we leave the quote ones, because I know you have 3 topics in there. Can you, because they seem like a family of blocks, can you show me from a transformation standpoint, can you transform among the 3? Like, will this transform into, so which one are you on? So Pullquote can transform into a quote. What can a verse transform into?
Let's go to a quote itself can transfer into a group, which makes sense because you have blocks inside of it, or columns, which is basically also similar to a group. So that's what you can transform because you have multiple blocks. A pull quote, since it's 1 block, can transform now into a paragraph, a heading, or a quote. And it's showing in the preview, it is showing that it will keep the formatting they put in the pull quote, which is interesting. See, now one of the things that we're getting now in WordPress is the live preview of things based on, I'll point with my finger to the right where you see with the red, it's carrying that over because it's actually applying it, which is a really neat thing. Instead of just saying, it's showing you this is what you're going to get. In the heading, it's just going to turn it into heading. Paragraph is just going to turn it into a paragraph. And the verse, I'm going to guess, is similar, where we get just paragraph.
Can you do one more thing, Peter? Can you show me for the verse, and maybe just the verse one at least, can you show the code behind it? So, if you go to the 3 dots there, edit as HTML. So it's a pre-formatted text block. That's what it really is. Okay. All right. You can steal my thunder on these things. Okay.
Exactly. Now you get to talk about that. Yeah.
Peter, does I tend to use Cadence theme a lot. Does this theme have a code block to display code, or do you have to CSS one?
No, that's what Ray's going to show that, I think, next.
Oh, okay.
Good segue. Good segue, Sue.
I do the best I can, Ray. Do the best I can.
And just the last thing too, just kind of reemphasizing that point around what's, for many people, again, you may be looking at these blocks saying, well, it's kind of interesting, but when am I going to use it? I mean, the way I see it is these text blocks, you think back to what, back to the 20th anniversary of WordPress. I mean, WordPress started off primarily as a blogging platform. In fact, it was primarily a blogging platform. So some of these blocks make a lot more sense for bloggers, which I'm not sure how many folks are on the call tonight who are primarily bloggers, or I'm sure you've worked with or written blog posts yourself at some point. So that's where I think the value is of these. It's nice having these kind of specialized text blocks for really blogging purposes. There's quite a few blogs where people put poetry and things like that, or quotes, etc.
So while you were talking, I just quickly switched to the Cadence theme.
Yeah, there you go. There's the quote icon.
There's the black line that folks are used to. There's the little quote symbol.
Yeah.
It's now using for verse
monospace text.
Monospace text, exactly. So
cool.
It gets, but then like down here where I did more formatting, you can see the quotes added, but a lot of the other formatting that I added when I was playing in my little practice area has stayed. So, and we could go through, maybe at the end, we'll just play with different themes,
Yeah.
but
All
there
right.
you go. All right. You're going to take ownership?
Yeah, let me grab the screen back. So Sue's fine segue into our next one. So that was quote pull quote. So I'm going to be covering next. Oops, sorry, the window's blocking me here. Code blocks. So again, very specialized. You know, why would you use this? Probably 99% of people, like maybe on this call, would not. Although again, we're a more technical group. So back in the day when I worked my corporate life in IT, I did read a lot of IT blogs, software development blogs. So that was always a challenge. Like, how do you show people lines of code? And when we talk about code, I'm talking computer code. So I'll show you an example of that in a minute. So how do you show that to people visually without executing the code? That's always the challenge. It's like, I don't want to run this thing. I just want to show you this HTML or PHP or JavaScript or whatever. So that's kind of the purpose of this thing. It's primarily, it's a very specialized use case, but there are people, especially from a blogging standpoint, who need something like this. The thing that's a bit confusing for people is this is not for adding short codes. I know that's a confusing thing if you've come from other some other platforms. This is not the place you put your short code in, because it won't run. So what's the value of this? Well, it preserves spacing and tabs. So for example, I'll jump over to here. So this is a code editor. This is visualstudio.net, and as you can see, in most code doesn't have to have tabs or whatever. This all can be one long line as long as there's a semicolon at the end, but it makes everyone's life easier. Computers don't care about tabs and spacing, but people do. So in order to read a line of code, a function, or HTML, etc., you want to have enough indentation and enough formatting preserved in that example or in that context. So that's really one of the big things it does. It preserves any spacing, tabs, etc. Behind the scenes, though, there's an HTML element specifically for showing code. So this is probably not something most people ever look at, but if you ever go to like W3 Schools, for example, everything behind the scenes has to display on a page. So there's a code tag for displaying this code, and it has some of these properties that your browser uses to display what's inside the content block. So by default, for example, content is displayed in that monospace font, and I'll show you an example of that. So the reason for that is that it really helps with alignment. If you look at that versus like a serif or sans serif, it's really hard to get those things aligned properly. Also, by default, again, depending on your theme, but by default, a 1-pixel border is displayed around the content of a code block. Otherwise, there's really not a lot of styling to it. Depending on your theme, that's the key thing. But you can also, just like anything, you could add a CSS class to it and style it to your heart's content. So I'll show an example of a code block in a second, but I'm going to show it along with its twin, in a sense, is the preformatted block. Very similar, but its purpose, it's not intended for showing computer code so much. So it's kind of a hybrid between a regular paragraph block and a code block. So it has a lot of the features and attributes of a code block. It preserves spaces and tabs, but behind the scenes, its content, just like we saw for that verse thing we looked at, because I was curious about what that was, but there's a pre-HTML tag, so for pre-formatted text. So again, that tag, what that really does is your browser recognizes that, and by default, again, you could override this, but by default, it'll display things, content in those tags in a monospace font. So we'll look at that. And again, unlike the code block, unless your theme does something weird with it, at least the one I'm playing with, there's no border by default around it. The one big difference, and I shouldn't say big, it's a minor difference, is you do have some additional styling, like text styling, available to you, depending on your theme, again, for a pre-formatted block than you do for a code block. But otherwise, for all intents and purposes, they're 90% similar, I'd say, between the two. So let's look at an example first of the code block. And just like Peter had a good idea, I didn't put it on mine, but just to show what theme I'm using, I'm really using the plain old vanilla 2021 theme. You may say, wait, why are you using that and not 2023? Because 2023 is a heavily, it's a block theme. So there's a lot of stuff in 2023 that doesn't behave like a true free block theme or a non-block theme. So 2021 is about as vanilla as you can get. So that's the theme that I'm using for this demo. And let's look at my pages here. So I have two examples. Let's look at the code one first. I'll just show you what it looks like first behind on the front end. Here's my code block demo. So again, as I said, code, code could be a snippet of HTML in this example, or code could be actual, a language like this is PHP. It could be, JavaScript, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, code. Code is kind of a generic term for it. But as you can see here, there's a border that gets put around it in this theme, at least by default, is this 1 pixel border. The monospace font, I've overridden that a bit, but the font I've overridden the size. I'll show you in a second. But the overall font itself is just this very blocky. Think about it like a dot matrix printer kind of font. But it's preserved in here all the indentation that I've done, so the tabs, etc. And here's the first tab, the second tab, etc. And none of this code is executing. That's the key thing. I'm showing you the code, but it's not running as I'm showing it. So let me go in here a little bit and let's look at how this is built on the back end. So I'm just gonna make my window a little bit bigger here, if that's okay. So the code block, I'll add one. Just let's add one up here in the beginning, just so you can see. Again, to add it, you can either go through the block editor on the top. It's code right here. You can select that, or there's a short code for it as well. You can do /code, I believe. Yeah, it's a /code. As you see, when you do that, all you do is you put your code into here. So let me grab another example real quick from here. I'll grab this little this if statement. So grab this if statement, copy that in here, and just paste it in. So since I did that, you see preserved the tabs, it preserves the formatting, etc. And behind the scenes, this is a code block. I just happen to have put this inside the column, but you don't have to have it inside of a column. But there's very minimal styling that you can do with it. So as I said, you can do some typography. So I can change the size of the font. I can make things bold in here. Some of those other dimension things, I can change appearance, decorations, etc. I can change the case. You wouldn't want to, though. If you want to preserve this, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to change this from lowercase to uppercase, because even from a code standpoint, that doesn't mean the same thing. So for all intents and purposes, there's probably not a lot of additional styling somebody would do to this. As I said, you can change the text size, etc., and a little bit of padding. So let me remove this one in here, remove the code. And then, so what you can do, though, from a styling standpoint, like I said, is the way to get additional styling is to put it inside the container. I know we're going to cover containers in a whole separate discussion, because there's a lot to talk about things like columns and rows, etc. But that's a real quick way. Even the verse blocks that Peter was showing earlier, even if those have some limited functionality, you could always throw it into a container like a column. And once you throw in a column, then you could do a lot more things. Then you could add background, you could do padding, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of a cheating way to do it, is to really add additional functionality to it. But the code block itself does also include some minimal things. I can change the text color, the background color, etc. So that's really what a code block does. And I'll show I'll show the transformations in the pre-formatted block. But did I miss any questions about the code block right now? Anything in the chat window that I didn't see?
No, there's been conversation about Brian Gardner's frosted.
Okay.
No, it's funny. It gets very tempting to want to put things in other containers to have a lot more control over it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, that this possibility. And yeah, when we were looking at the verse block, I think the reason that it's basically a formatted pre-text is so that you could do all of just the carriage returns without it. Right. Paragraphs.
As you can see, what's weird about this is for some reason WordPress has chosen to implement this code block inside of a pre-block, which I'm not exactly sure if they needed to, but that's just the way it's implemented. So this is actually a code inside of a pre. Again, probably doesn't matter to anybody, but just, you know, if you're looking at this behind the scenes, that's what it looks like. So let me show you the pre-formatted one, because that, like I said, that'll just take 5 minutes, because it's pretty much the same as this with some subtle differences. Oops, sorry, let me do an update here. Back to my pre-formatted block demo. So this guy, yeah, looks very similar. In this case, it's not code I'm showing, it's just text. So I'll go into edit mode in a second. But as you can see, here's regular paragraph blocks. We'll look at this, because you can still indent in paragraph blocks, but the big difference is, we'll look at this in a second, these are individual blocks, whereas this is a single block. It's monospace font by default. And as you can see, it preserves the tabs. And I'll show an example where I think maybe the code block or the pre-formatted block, this is probably a practical example of how you can use it with a paragraph block. Let me just edit this page. So as I said, these blocks, I mean, you could, if you look at this, you're like, hey, wait a minute, these are, you know, they're tabbed. So why do I need this block? But if you look here, every one of them is a separate paragraph. So I copied and pasted this text out of Word, pasted it in. If you recall, if you were here for last month's event, I forget who asked the question, she may not be on here, but there's a question about, hey, every time I paste text from a document, it's always pasting every paragraph as a separate paragraph. And there was some concern about, how do I stop that? One way you could do that is put it into a pre-formatted block. That's it. As you can see, what a pre-formatted block does is it's a single block with all of that text in it. There's trade-offs. If you're only doing it just to paste it in here, then you're gonna have to change the styling and all that. So it's probably not worth it. But this is one subtle difference. You know, this single pre-formatted block contains multiple paragraphs inside of it. So again, it's preserved everything in here, preserved the tabs, etc. Probably a more practical example, just to show this real quick, is, so here I have an example of a regular old paragraph block. So it's a recipe, right? So it's a single paragraph block, but there's a bunch of line breaks in here, like, you know, alt, carriage returns, etc. So it's just one paragraph block, but just a list of text. So as you can see, I mean, in whatever my default font is for this theme, I forget. I mean, it looks okay. It kind of lines up, you know, but it's a little bit off, you know, some of the text, etc. Especially lines that wrap a bit are a little tough to see. So what I'm going to do is, because you can do transformations, I'm going to transform this paragraph into a, oops, sorry, I'm going to transform the paragraph into a pre-formatted block. So voila, that's it looks better. You know, it's now you probably would have to do some styling around the text, etc. But let me just show you this on the front end. So, you know, that's a quick way to, for certain text, I mean, it lines up properly. Obviously, you'd have to change some of the width to make it fit a bit better. If I reduce the font size, it'll fit, you know, better within this column. So that's it. That's the, you know, again, from a transformation standpoint, because I asked Peter that same question, you can transform between these two. So I can transform a pre-formatted into a code and vice versa, or just back into paragraphs. So paragraph in this case would keep it as a single paragraph, and I believe the code one would do that as the same. Any questions? Again, very specific use cases, I think, for these things, but it's good to know that they're there if you ever do have a need for it.
One of the things that was brought up has to do with these are display. So just for displaying code versus, for example, the HTML block, which will
it'll execute. Yeah, that's where you put a short code. You want that in there because that's really going to, whatever, if you put a snippet of, let's say, script, you know, sometimes you get a code where it's, oh, put some JavaScript someplace. That's the block you would use. Yeah, not the code block. Code block won't execute. Exactly.
So if you took, right, that's a great example. If you had some JavaScript and you post it here, you would see what the script is.
Yeah.
If you post it into HTML block, it would run that script. So
exactly.
That's the difference between showing code and running code. Those.
All right. So I'm gonna stop. Do you want to stop sharing, or do you want me to show your slide?
I'll take over.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
You got really big on my screen there, right? So we are now at the table block, right?
Yes.
The underappreciated table block. I like the table block. It's very handy. I like it way better than the classic editor WYSIWYG table. But at the same time, and one of the things we haven't really mentioned, and we'll spend time at another point to say, well, what are the options for these? This is core stuff. There are a lot of ways you can put a table into your WordPress posts and pages. I use different tools. I use Ninja tables. People use TablePress, a lot of tools. We're talking about the table block, a core block, bring it over, have a table. So it's an easy way to insert simple tables into a post. You're not going to get super complex tables, but you can get a lot of real handy things, especially if you've got just something you want to kind of quickly display. You can, when you add this block, you're setting the number of rows and columns, whether you want a header row or a footer row. You can easily add rows and columns. You can put paragraph type, text only, numbers as text in a cell. So each cell is just, you can write copy text and you can format it, but you can't add a lot of things to the core block. You can't put an image in there, things like that. And you have relatively basic design options, but in a lot of cases, that's exactly what we're looking for. So if I come over here to my example, if I edit this post, I'll show you just that same thing. I'm going to insert it by hitting I could hit /T, or I can come over here to my inserter and go and select table, and it pops the table there. And what the first thing the table block does is ask you how many columns do you want, how many rows do you want. And this could, if you're not 100% sure how many rows, for example, that you're going to want, you can always add rows. But let's just say we want a 4 columns, 5 rows. Create the table. There we go. There we have a table. We can just start typing in our content that we want here. If you wanted to have a header section and a footer section, when you've got your row block selected, and you can see, if we look at the inserter on the table is one block. Even though it has all of these things in it, it acts as one block. You don't have all these little subcontainers in it like you have in some of the other like grid blocks and things like that. So it all lives within this block. If I wanted to put a header section over here in my block options, I turn on the header section. If I want to put on the footer section, I could put on the footer section. Fixed width table cells I'll show you in a minute, but see how the table is adjusting based on that. If I make it fixed width, it's going to make all of them the same width. That's the very basics of a table. I'm going to show over here. Let me bring this table up top. I use my handy little move up keys where I already put some content in here. Just my columns and rows. When you're inside a row, you can select, your bolds. You can decide that you're going to highlight something with a color. That was a terrible color. You can't see it. The accessibility alarm should be going off. Maybe I want to make that this, and my background that color. That you can do these types of things within the within each additional cell. Now, as far as your default settings over here and how things look, I'm clicking now off of my options and into my that left right circle is your styling tab in most blocks now. You do have kind of two choices out of the default is what you're seeing, lines around each box. There is a stripe option. If I hover over it, you can see it pop up to the left. If I choose it, it's giving me Stripe options, I did highlight that one cell with that color so you can see how that would work, but instead of having lines, now you're using sort of that, you know, that stripe section, that stripe way of doing things. So you have some basic styling kind of built in. I can change the color of the text. Say I wanted all my text purple, and I want my background to be, you know, a light gray for some reason. I want it this way. And then when you get into on the styling, I can also go to my border and set that out the border. If you don't set it, it'll default to the text color. You can override it here by going down to border. I can set widths just by the dragging and dropping, by the dragging of the slider here, or I could put in a number if I had a certain width that I wanted. I could change the text size, all of those same types of things that you have in a lot of the other in the other blocks. You have the copy and pasting. So if I copy the style and I come over to another table and I paste the style, it now has changed that to that unattractive look. So
Peter, can you also change the line weight for the outside compared to the inside lines? Like it said border, but I didn't see. Can you click on the 3 dots and see if you can change the border down by border at the bottom?
Yep.
On those 3 dots? No, just reset.
but if I unlock this,
Yeah, you can unlock it, but it only changes the exteriors. Okay.
yeah, exactly. The funny thing is let me, if I can Control Z back enough when I was.
But the header actually has a header line, does have a double.
Exactly. And I thought I saw.
So these styles came with the theme, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
What style, what theme are you using again? Is this Frost?
Yeah, this one is 2023. We can play with it in Frost.
Okay.
Yeah, the 2023 theme.
Okay. Thanks.
You can see it on the front end. One of the things I want to show you, and we'll play with the different things, is again, something that's, let me make sure that I show you this part, which is if you needed to add rows or columns or remove rows or columns, that's this box here, this choice here. You insert row before where you are, insert row after, delete the row, insert column before, insert column after. If I wanted an extra column before, for example, you know, that's how you can manipulate the size by using this particular this selection here. If I want to delete that column, I can.
Peter, what does that table look like on mobile?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking, because I never used the table block as a mobile.
We used to do tables with percentages and not pixel widths
Yeah,
for mobile. Is that an option? I didn't see it, but
I don't think in the core
wow.
block.
That's exactly why people don't use tables.
Yeah.
Unless you put it into, you could put it into like a row and then make the section on the row a percentage width. I don't know how the table would act if you did that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably where if you got clever with CSS, then you would go in there.
Oh yeah.
Modify things with CSS.
Well, I think at that point too, once you're starting to look at responsive tables, then you go to the plugins. You know, I think that's when you start, you know, instead of reinventing the wheel, look at some of the free plugins out there for tables.
Exactly. I mean, you know, obviously one of the things to do and check is to say, well, depending on what you're doing, if a table doesn't, you know, if you need to put a table that just won't work on mobile, then you might want to look for a different option, or just, you know that there are scrolling tables and things like that where you can move.
Peter, in this theme,
Yeah.
can you write custom CSS only on a page? Because you could give the table a class and give it a width of like 80%, you know, do the if viewport is thing.
Yeah, no, that you can certainly do that.
I mean, if you only needed one table on your entire site, you could do that.
Right.
But if you were going to use them regularly, no, raise right, get a plugin.
Yeah. Yeah, you can
Even to the
obviously,
point of styling too. I think Elisa had asked about like, what if you want the border thicker than the interior? You can change that through CSS. You can't change that through the controls. So
exactly. That's exactly right. I didn't want to forget one of the things that I think is kind of interesting is this. If I go to, here's a Google Sheet. If I copy this, Control C, and now I come over here just, and I, don't even tell it what block, and I paste it, it's going to paste it as a table, which is handy. And in fact, pretty much any, let's try this. This is my best friend Chat GPT. I asked it to create a table for me. Here's a table of the planets and the number of moons. Let's try copying this. And it'll probably bring over some of the formatting too. And there you go. So
Laura has a question. Go ahead, Laura.
It was just a comment when you guys were talking about the mobile thing. If you click on it and go into styles and change the font size to an REM, to a REM, it does do better in the mobile.
Yeah, instead of fixed font size. Yeah.
Yeah.
there you go.
So I did like 1 or 1.2.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with this block, like you said, it's impressive for a quick and dirty table.
Right.
You don't want to do a giant, like I support the genealogy website. We're not doing our tables in these things because we're also
Right.
connecting those to MySQL databases and all that. But this is, for a couple 2-column table or something, this is great.
Yeah, and that's what that in a lot of cases, there's so many times when that's all you just need a quick little, comparison of a few things that is going to fit and work in different formats, in different devices. Let me see what this does look like if I go. So, again,
Yeah,
this would be
that's good.
mobile. Doesn't look bad.
Yeah.
That's definitely possible. You could only put so much content here, right? I mean, if I went 12 columns wide, then we're in a different category here. But yeah, and let me refresh this. Get out of that.
I mean, it's neat. I think Michael mentions this as well too. It was really neat that copy and paste you did from the Google Sheet that actually recognized what the header was too. So I'm assuming, again, the Google Sheet, because it's, it's a Google Online application behind the scenes, that's probably saved as a HTML table as well too. So maybe that's how
what
it
it is.
recognized.
Yeah, it's
column.
interpreting the HTML exactly. And also, just in case you wanted to align the column center, this is just another formatting.
Peter, could you do a HTML inspect on that table that you're playing with right now?
Figure.
All right, there's nothing really weird in there.
Now
Table
it's all
header, it's a table. No, there it is. An old HTML table.
Yeah, it's not like copying from Word in the old days.
Yeah.
no, it's so much smarter.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it's so much smarter. And I want to show it because I know a lot of people on this call too, like we're looking for fast ways to do things. And I have found some really zippy ways. And sometimes it's a matter of going into like a Google Sheet and doing a quick table there and just pasting it, instead of,
It's with the controls here. Yeah.
and then you can drag and drop and get all the, column 1, column 2, column 3, because it automatically fills things in and things like that.
Does it work with Excel too?
So it doesn't.
Oh, discrimination.
What I did was you just go from Excel and paste that
Google
into
Sheet.
Google Sheets and then paste from Google Sheets into here. So
Because Excel is not saving it as HTML. You can, I think you can. They're not excellent.
yeah, I mean, if you went to that step and said save it as HTML and then copied from
Yeah.
there, you could certainly do it. But again, it's just it's a handy little tool that I think is understood. And in a lot of cases, so if you're using a plugin like a table press or something, for a lot of cases you might not need that. You've got these tools here now. Can you drag and drop something from one row to another? You can't, because it's not working as separate items in there. I mean, you could if you went into edit HTML and found the right.
Easy way to break a table.
Yeah, and I have done things like take this, put it into a notepad editor, format it, get the way I want it, paste it back in. I mean, there's always a way, right? There's always a way to do things. But in terms of those quick ways of doing things, I kind of like it. Do they cover everything I wanted to?
Yeah.
Let's just color so table with an. Oh, table with two can be things like you can go to that same align left, align right, align center. You can go wide width. So if we preview that, now it's going to break out of. So you have these types of formatting capabilities, again, dependent on your theme and your container for your theme. But it is something built into core to be able to go wide width. And so if your theme respects that, most do, in terms of the full width, the wide width, align right. Let's see what that does. I'm sure it's just going to do that. Align right and wrap things so that it acts like an image would wrap, right? So, so probably a little bit harder to control if you ask me, but yeah, you could.
Just quick, if you covered everything you want, Peter, what is just again the transformation? So what can you transform that block into? Because I wonder if anything, it's just a column or group. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And group, let's see if you can actually, is it going to transform it or put it in a
It's
group?
going to put it in. Yeah, I would think it's going to put it in. So this is a funny one. You can't actually transform it into anything else, which makes sense. It's not really, you can't break that apart into a bunch of paragraphs.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool.
Are there any questions on the lowly but very, very useful table block?
Yeah,
That
this
was
is a good
like a
one.
trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
All right, let me grab, I'll show you one last one and then we'll have a little bit of time left for, I'll grab the sharing from you, Peter. All right, one last one, which is the also misunderstood, classic block. So what is this classic block and why would you ever possibly want to use it? Well, the reason it's there, again, that there was a time of transition once where there was resistance to Gutenberg, the block editor and all that. So it really was a way to keep that classic editor feel, and that was kind of called like the tiny MCE editor. I don't remember exactly what this stood for, but it was a way to kind of keep that experience, but also start transitioning people towards the block editor. So that's what it replicates. It replicates inside of a block and inside of a block theme or let's say the block editor. It replicates the old classic editor style, and I'll show you what that looks like if you're not familiar with the classic editor. This is not the same as the classic editor plugin. I installed that. We'll look at that on the demo site. The difference with that, if you install the classic editor plugin and you activate that by default, that takes over versus having the block editor. You can adjust it now from that plugin, but that one's more of a drastic thing. Say, I wanted to use classic editor on all my pages or posts. This is just within a page or post is one specific block. So also, if you've converted a site, let's say from a bunch of content that was created using the old classic editor, and so you've upgraded the theme, and now you're using a theme that has blocks, some of your converted pages or posts, the content will remain. Some of them may be wrapped in these classic editor blocks. So that may be another place where you've seen this. So again, why would you still intentionally use it? If you're a person new to the block editor, you're still getting familiar with it, but you're familiar with the old editor, you have a way to dip your toes in, so you can still have some content in this old editor experience, but meanwhile you get the benefits of being inside the block editor. Kind of a neat byproduct. Again, I wouldn't say this is necessarily a thing you want to do all the time, but it does keep different pieces of content together as a single unit. So again, back to last month, we had a question about cutting and pasting a bunch of text, and all these paragraph blocks got formed. Well, this is a way to retain all that content into a single a single block rather than multiple blocks, and I'll show you that in my example. And another reason may be that maybe you have a plugin, one of these old plugins that the way that it would insert content into your post is through that old TinyMCE editor. So I'll show an example of that. I think I installed one that's like a YouTube shortcode. So, maybe they don't have a block yet, and you don't want to lose that functionality. So you may still have a need to use this as kind of a workaround for that. So, again, the downfall of this classic block is that it doesn't include all those options that you get from the block editor. So everything you see in the sidebar that we're looking at, changing fonts and all that, you don't get that for a classic block. Everything's inside of the editor of the block itself. Let's look at this and show you what I'm talking about here. So first off, before I do that, if you're not familiar with it, and again, these days, I don't know if there's a real reason to do this or not, but there is this classic editor plugin. So this is a legit plugin. It's still supported, at one point, this used to be the #1 downloaded plugin on the WordPress repository when there was great resistance to Gutenberg and the block editor. I think it's probably gone down a little bit since then, hopefully, because people have adopted the block editor and seen the value of it. But anyway, you can still install this. And basically what it does is if you activate this, I'll just turn it on. I'll turn it off in a second. But this is turning, you can control it. In this plugin, I'm saying I want to use the block editor for everything, or I can use it for everything. So for all my posts and pages, basically it's kind of hiding the block editor in the background. That's a drastic thing, and there may be times where you need to do that. Maybe a theme just doesn't behave well with blocks, etc. But that's not what we're talking about here. So let me just deactivate that again. So what we're talking about is a specific block. I think I have it right here, called the classic block. So just to show you the demo page, so there's some content in here, just a paragraph and some text, a little bit of a quote, not a pull quote, just and a little image. So behind the scenes, what does this look like? All of this is contained inside of this classic block. So this first one is a regular, as you can see, this page has a mix. So this block is a regular old paragraph block. This one's a classic block. So inside the classic block, as soon as you click on it, you get this editor. By default, the toolbar is actually toggled off. But this is, if you recall, your old posts and pages pre-Gutenberg. This is what your editor looked like. So you had, here's where you change your, you can change from paragraph to heading tags, etc. You can put quotes, things, here's all your alignment. So as I said, if you go with a classic block, as you'll see on my sidebar, I don't have any of those block editor settings and styling options here. Everything is inside of here. So I still can do things like, for example, I can bold, I can italicize, I can do some basic alignment, but it's all using this old editor experience. So like this, for example, I think this is a quote block, and you can insert media. So as I said, I've added a media file in here. As I mentioned before, if you have maybe an old plugin where it only integrated with this editor, so for example, this YouTube Wizard plugin, this now it does have a block, but for a while there, you may still encounter some plugins that didn't support blocks natively. So if I click on this, it'll bring me through this little YouTube Wizard where I can basically embed a shortcode. That's what these things typically do. So that would embed it into my content. I won't do that for this example. So altogether, as I said, if you look at this, there's not a lot of styling you can do with this, but the advantage is it's all this content is contained inside of this one spot. And like I said, the things you can do with this is you do get some basic block functionality, so I can duplicate it, I can move it around just like I would a normal block. So that's one good thing. What I'll show though is the other thing is you can actually transform it back into its native block components. So this is just a duplicate of that thing we're looking at. So you can convert this to blocks. And when I do that, it breaks it apart. So it's now taken the individual components. So it took this and created it as a paragraph. It knew that this was a quote block. So now it's a quote block and this is an image block. So, it's one of those like, you wouldn't want to group things together intentionally into a classic block, but you can break apart classic blocks. So I don't know if you can transform them. Let's see if you can transform them into No, I grouped it together. I think I would just have to do undo to get it back. So it has some limited functionality. Like I said, I think you lose out though a lot on styling. So this, to me, this block is probably intended more for a transitional thing. So any content that perhaps couldn't convert cleanly or that you have concerns with, this may be a solution for that, to put it inside of this for the time being, and then later, hopefully, like let's say that this is a plugin that was. Here's probably a better example. Let's say there's a plugin that was developed in-house. Somebody created a specific plugin, and you don't know when they're going to ever turn that into a block. You may have a need to still use something like this for the time being. Any questions about this one? Again, it's a real kind of edge use case on this. Probably you may encounter this in the wild. I think we're going to see it most in the wild is when you've converted, a page, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, some things are now showing up as classic blocks.
Well, I think it's important to know that in most cases, and yeah, you have to try it. And there's folks, Wendy had mentioned still using the classic editor, and we get that. But then when you do transition over to block editing, whether you use a block theme or just a classic theme, but using the blocks, your content will come over in a big classic block like Ray is showing here, and you can convert or not convert. You don't have to convert. You don't have to go back to old posts and change everything. Things will, for the most part, work unless you come across something that for whatever reason doesn't. You want to check your content and all. Another thing in terms of transition, and Ray, forgive me if I missed when you said this, is for some people you can start be more comfortable opening up a classic block and just writing like you used to, and then hitting convert, right? So that idea of using it depending on what your writing style is. So
and that's where I say if you're at that point, you're probably better off going into like a Word document or a Google Doc, doing it all there, and then copying and pasting it. It can be used like that. Like I said, this is another way, back to that other example. Somebody said, oh, I have all this content, I don't want it to be a bunch of paragraphs. I mean, behind the scenes in HTML, it is a bunch of elements and stuff. So it doesn't matter. It's just visually, I get it. Visually, you're not seeing this huge list. Like when I convert this, imagine this on a much, much larger block, you would see everything exploded out to its individual components, but who cares? Is kind of my point. So. All right. I didn't see anything else come up in the chat.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So that's our roundup of the text blocks. Like I said, I think part one, if you haven't seen that, those are probably the ones people are going to use, I'd assume, most often, the paragraph ones. This one, though, I do think the table block is kind of an exciting one that you may not be aware of, that just the power of that. It's not the replacement for, like you said, like what's the one I use, WP data tables or table press or those kind of things. But for a quick and dirty, simple table, it's right there. It's built into WordPress. No need to go hunt down another block to do that. And it has actually quite a bit of styling. I was surprised how much you can do in that block. So let me see. Did I have anything else in our wrap up? One second. I'm gonna go back to slides for a second. I think that was it for our slides. A classic block demo, wrap up, and Q&A. So we still have Q&A time. We're like 7:30, so we definitely talk about anything. Peter can show some examples of flipping the theme around and how things look different. But before I forget, in case people do start dropping off, and you can feel free to drop off anytime. So we're doing our summer sessions starting next month. So for June, July, and August. So we did it last year. We actually had a great experience. It's just Peter and I talking to each other. We're fine with that. We hope you join us, though. It's really much more less structured than this. It's summertime. We don't want to create a bunch of slides, so feel free to join us for that. We'll have some open discussions. We really, really enjoy looking at people's websites because why not? It's fun to look at. So if you have a nagging feeling, there's something you just want us to take a look at, you'll have a great group of experts on here besides ourselves. And then that's a great time. We'll just do some fun stuff. Like Peter's our AI chat GPT guy. He's got a lot of fun stuff to show there. So think of that as, you know, it's a show and tell thing. Bring some neat stuff that you're playing around with or interested in to those summer sessions. I think we'll have some fun. We'll learn a lot from each other. So a fun travel site challenge. Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So do you any other questions before we? I know we have, like I said, a little bit of time. Do you want to show Peter? Maybe flip around. I mean, you kind of did it. I know, of looking at the differences in themes and how a theme would affect styling.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm kind of putting something real quick as you're speaking. So let's take a look. Let me grab the screen, and yeah, please, if anyone else has anything they want to talk about, let us know. All
Thanks
right.
for joining us, Elisa.
Okay, see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so let's start playing with some themes. So I've got a few loaded here. I can add a few more. I've got some block themes. I've got some classic themes. So right now, active is the Frost theme. We've been picking on Brian. Brian has created a great theme. The Frost theme is very, you know, it has the Brian style of minimalism and black and white kind of styles. And he does have different color palettes that you can look at. So this is, I've kind of glued together my tables and my various quotes. I was putting in some of the defaults in. So this is Frost. Let's see if I can keep that there, and I'll just open up a new window. So let's change to Astra. So I'm going to activate that. I'm just copying this. I'm going to leave Frost open and see if we can't. So this is the same things now in the Astra theme. Default, not customized, not setting up content with, but just, you know, kind of looking at how it handles some of the blocks, maybe a little bit different. The quote block, it's got the gray line. That line spacing is kind of interesting there. This is a pull quote with just the CSS adds that quotation mark, puts it in a box. It did remove, interestingly enough, in this case, is asked to remove that red bottom that I think might still be over here. Yep, that's what we customized, and we'll see that stick, but Astra decided it didn't want to keep that. Very interesting. So that's Astra. Blocksy, let's activate Blocksy. And I will come over here and I will put in the same page. And now under Blocksy is nice because there's a basicness about Blocksy that I like. You can see the quotes now, the default of the left bar here, no quotation marks. Again, this is default layout here. Pull quote added that quotation mark. Again, these are formatted. I don't think I put that's just the default, interestingly enough, has a blue box around it for a pull quote. Whereas when I changed it, when we were demoing it, and I changed the border to just show the top and bottom, and I added radius, and I said no border on the left and right, it kept that. This is the default. The font is this size. This is what we changed it to. So you can see, but that is what Blocksy did with that. Let's see the tables. Oh, I already saw the tables. They were up here. Not too much. Let's go to pick a theme, pick any theme. Gutenfi, which is an interesting theme I was looking at in terms of a block theme. So Gutenfi is a block theme, and it has variations of it. So you can see how Gutenfi, now all of a sudden we're getting all of this stuff. This is built into their templates. So kind of an interesting experiment. Now we're getting left sidebar because that's what their default theme layout is. But now we're getting a little bit of a different look to our content. They overrode the colors for the quote. Well, that's the default. This is what I had played with. The pull quote is still the default is just this line. What we played with the red is there. So that is the Gutenfi. That's the base because they have all kinds of variations. Chicago is a block theme that's also a Brian Gardner theme. Even is it Chicago or avant-garde? It's avant-garde, I think. Yeah, avant-garde. He just uses, I always say Chicago because that's the big text he uses. So now you're seeing kind of in his style the minimalistic, the large fonts. His default for the quotes is white text on a black background, but in the example when I overrode that, so you can override that. This is interesting where it has my red border, but his white text on a black background because I did not override that in the default. So as you can see, as you experiment with the various, let's go to our friend.
And some of it just, sorry to interrupt. So some of it is not just the visually what's different, but even on the back end, if you're using a block theme,
Oh.
for example, I'm using the, WordPress 2021 theme, whatever.
Yep.
You don't have access to those other styling options like, dimensions or padding,
Yes.
or it's more limited. So the newer themes that are block aware, block enabled may give you additional things even on the back ends that are different. Even for
Definitely.
the core WordPress blocks, like that's sometimes a little bit confusing too.
Yeah. So this is the Cadence theme using, their default quote, left line, that size text. This is the stuff we put in, respecting the right align of that image. Okay,
Yep.
that's good. Pull quote default is just, in a box, italics. Did take out the other formatting that we had put in. The verse is using that pre-font.
Yeah, the mono type. Yeah.
Ollie is a new font, a new block theme that's getting a lot of attention, and I think it's got a lot. I'm looking forward to watching Ollie develop. I did notice some issues with some things, but it's a nice, clean, and it's got a lot of nice options. Like, this is how they're dealing with the pull quote. Okay. So that's the Ollie theme. This is how they handled the verse. So I can't even think, what's the words for
Central line, you mean? Or
yeah, no, I'm like, same width, different width.
oh,
I'm drawing a complete blank on the most basic typography word there is. Let's see if I can find something that's even either more common. 2023, where 20. Let's add 2021. Let's see what you were experiencing.
yeah.
So
That one, like I said, I've kind of just from our last demos, I learned that one seems to be the most stripped down in terms of, well, it doesn't have any full site editing stuff, but then it also seems like it's not really completely block aware.
So this is the 2021 theme. Yeah,
It's kind of the old, the quotes have the old kind of just
the little teeny tiny quote in the corner. Well, this is the default what it does. So, can't stress enough this idea of when we show something and you go back and you say it doesn't look anything like it. We're just showing the exact same page in all of these different Spectre One, another block quote, another block theme by the Astra folks. It's another Spectre One and the Spectre Blocks, another great package to consider. Let's see what they how they handle.
Maybe show one more, Peter. I think we can drop it up. We're having people start dropping it. So
okay. I lulled them into drop-off zone.
No, this is good to see, because I think it reemphasized that.
So it's always fascinating. And then if we went into editing the page, the editing experience would be
Right.
different in these different themes.
All right.
All righty.
Thanks everyone for sticking around to part 2, and hopefully you saw part 1. Like we said, try playing around with these blocks. I definitely think there's some hidden features to them. That again, if you don't use them all the time, you know, you can certainly find something for your purpose. So, yeah, some are kind of specialized, but it's just good to know how they work too, because it might not be something where you create, but you come onto a site and you find that on a page. You're like, what is this thing? Like, what can I do with it? So hopefully this helped you understand that a little bit better. Like I said, we hope you join us for our summer school sessions. It won't be painful. There's no tests or quizzes or anything. So it's just gonna come free for all kind of thing. Just to wear your shorts and all that stuff. But thanks everyone again for joining us. Like I said, I'll send out the recording probably sometime tomorrow. I'll send out a link to that along with the link to our website. We can look at all the slides and just all the other information. So thanks everyone who joined us, and we'll hope to see you everyone again next time. So have a good night.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
See
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.